All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're tackling one of the most mysterious and, let's be honest, misunderstood parts of the Bible, those 7 messages at the very beginning of the book of Revelation. I want you to imagine something. What if you received a performance review, but from the cosmos? It sounds a little out there, right? But that's actually a fantastic way to think about these 7 messages. They weren't just dusty, ancient letters. No way. These were direct, divine evaluations for real communities that were under some serious pressure. We're talking about 7 actual historical churches in what is now modern-day Turkey. They were plopped right down in the heart of the Roman Empire. And here's the kicker. To be part of Roman society, to hold a job, run a business, just to get by, you often had to participate in the state religion, which included worshiping the emperor. So you can see why a performance review in that kind of environment, well, the stakes were unbelievably high. Okay, so let's dive in. To really unlock what's going on in these messages, we have to start with the language of the book itself. Because, and this is a big one, some of the most important words in Revelation just don't mean what we usually think they mean today. Let's start with the big one, apocalypse. Right away, our brains go to end of the world, disaster flicks, all that stuff. But the original Greek word, apocalypsis, actually means an unveiling, a reveal. It's like, imagine you're watching a play. An apocalypse is when someone pulls back the curtain and shows you everything that's happening backstage, that hidden, heavenly reality that's actually driving all the action you see on the stage of history. It's a complete shift in perspective. So here's a puzzle that comes up right away. The text says these messages are written to the angels of the 7 churches. So who or what are these angels? It's a really important question if we want to figure out who's supposed to be listening. Well, there are a couple of main ideas. One is that angels just meant human messengers, or maybe the pastors of the churches. Pretty straightforward. But there's another idea that fits that whole unveiling theme way better. The idea that these are the heavenly counterparts, the actual angelic representatives for each of the earthly communities. You see how that clicks? It's pulling back that curtain again to show the spiritual reality behind the physical one. Okay, get ready for a bit of a surprise. Here's a huge clue for decoding these things. They aren't actually letters in the way we think of them. They don't follow the format of an ancient letter at all. No Dear Ephesus, no Sincerely John. So if they're not letters, what in the world are they? This is where it gets really interesting. They look a lot more like prophetic proclamations. Or even, get this, like a royal edict that a king or a Roman emperor would issue to his subjects. So this isn't a casual chat. This is King Jesus issuing a formal, authoritative decree. And that changes everything about how we read them. And that brings us to the decoder ring for all of this. Because what's absolutely wild is that once you see the pattern, you just can't unsee it. Every single one of these 7 messages follows the exact same 6-part blueprint. So here's that blueprint. First, there's an address to a specific church. Then, a title for Jesus that is perfectly tailored to that church's situation. Then comes the I know statement. He sees exactly what they're doing. After that, you get the praise or the critique. Then a promise to the overcomer. And finally, a call for everyone with ears to hear what's being said. It's so structured, so deliberate. So let's see this blueprint in action, right? We're going to put it to the test by looking at 2 churches that were worlds apart, Ephesus and Smyrna. So on one side, you have Ephesus. These guys were the guardians of good doctrine. They could spot a false teacher a mile away. And on the other side, you've got Smyrna, a church that was being absolutely hammered by persecution. And wow, when you put them side by side like this, the contrast is just staggering. Look at Ephesus. Commendation? Check. They're doctrinally pure? Awesome. But then the condemnation hits. They've forsaken their first love. The danger? Their entire witness could be removed. Now look over at Smyrna. Their commendation? They endure affliction. They're rich in faith, even though they're poor. And their condemnation? There isn't one. Nothing. Not a single negative word. So what was the deal with Ephesus? Well, the message is crystal clear. You can have all the right doctrine, you can hate all the right evil things, but if you've lost that first love, that passionate foundational relationship, it's all starting to become empty. They were literally in danger of having their lampstand removed, which means they could just cease to exist as a church. And then you have Smyrna. The message to them is just pure encouragement. Jesus starts by saying he's the one who died and came back to life, basically saying, I get it, I've been there. And then he promises them, be faithful even to the point of death, and I will give you the crown of life. It's this incredible promise that their suffering is seen
and that ultimate victory is guaranteed.
You know, what's really striking is when you zoom out and look at all 7 churches together. 5 of them, a solid majority, get these serious warnings about compromise and just getting lazy and comfortable. It's only the 2 churches that were under intense persecution, Smyrna and Philadelphia, that get a completely clean bill of health. That's kind of telling, isn't it? So that brings up a pretty big question. Why these 7 churches? And maybe more importantly, what does any of this have to do with us today? Well, a huge part of the answer is actually hidden in plain sight. It's in the number itself, 7. See, in this kind of writing, the number 7 is huge. It symbolizes completeness, perfection, the whole shebang. So this isn't some secret code predicting 7 different ages of church history, which is a popular theory. No, the idea is that these 7 churches together represent the complete range of challenges and failures and victories that churches in any era could possibly face. They're timeless archetypes. And here's the final, crucial piece of the puzzle that helps make sense of the entire book of Revelation. All those wild visions that come next, the dragons, the beasts, all of it, it's not actually a new story. Believe it or not, chapters 4 through 22 are symbolically retelling the very same conflict we see right here in these 7 messages. It's just giving that heavenly perspective, that backstage view on their earthly struggles. Themes like being a faithful witness versus being deceived, they're just blown up onto a cosmic screen. In fact, many of the final promises made to the overcomers right here are pulled directly from the very end of the book. So when you boil it all down, what's the core message? It's a timeless, urgent wake-up call. It's a warning against getting too comfortable, too complacent, too cozy with the world around us. And it's an encouragement to wake up and be a faithful witness. Which really leaves us with one last big question to think about. If we take this ancient blueprint and hold it up to our world, our communities, our society today, what would it praise? And what would it warn us against? What would our cosmic performance review look like?